7 days, so it gives you some.
Stand by. I'll be here in a second.
Advance. It doesn't disclose anything. Yeah, it gives, I guess.
Okay. I think I got it right. Happy Monday, YouTube. I am Mrs. Dave the lawyer, real name Jacqueline Leah. So we have been restreaming the congressional committee, the rules committee, for, I don't know, I think this is day 4. It's like a 5-hour plus stream. And, one of the topics that they're discussing is insider trading and the Save America Act. So this has actually been like a very, very interesting stream. I've never streamed the rules committee before. I don't think Mr. Dave did as well. So I was like very surprised that it's been pretty interesting. A lot of characters that I've seen before, but not in the same setting. So I think there could be a good chance that we could get through the rest of the hearing tonight. Or if not, we will certainly finish it tomorrow night. There's still a lot of good hearings from the last couple of weeks that we have to stream. As always, I'm here in the chat. I can see you, and I will be responding. And let's get this started.
The press a couple of days if they happen to be following your specific trades, and gives them a little bit of a head start on trying to figure out what you were doing. But let's be clear. No one is going to say because I had information which led me to sell. But the good news is I did it for 7 days, so it gives you some advance time to figure out what was motivating me.
Well,
I mean, it's a silly.
Gives you cover. All it does is give you cover. And I think the bigger, huge, like gaping hole of this bill is that we might have information, or we might be, and in this instance, going to be one of hundreds of votes. The reality is there is a man, and there will always be a man, and hopefully someday a woman, who can move markets much bigger than any one of us, and that is the President of the United States. And this bill does not cover that at all. And we know that this is happening. Truth Social, President Trump said, with regards to NVIDIA, I've gotten all necessary permits. This company is going to go through. It's great. He never told everybody on Truth Social that he had bought $200,000 to $500,000 of that company's stock. And a CNN investigation found that President Trump is marketing stocks on Truth Social after he's purchased shares. Now, Chairman Steele, your bill doesn't cover the president or the vice president, does it?
Is that a question? No, it is focused on Congress, per the jurisdiction of the Committee on House Administration.
Oh, okay, but we have jurisdiction. Congress has jurisdiction, and we are the only ones who can say the president should not be purchasing or selling stock because he controls the market. Congress is the one, and if we don't tell him, nobody else is going to do it. Is that correct, Ranking Member?
Absolutely.
And earlier we had a conversation about the fact that President Trump has now said that he's going to sell early access to Wall Street on Truth Social. I don't know what you thought about that. There was a conversation about it, but I think in the end, Chairman Steele, you never told us what you thought about having a president give access to Wall Street early on, paid access for information that could move the market. Do you think that should be allowed?
I haven't read those reports.
Okay, well, I'm going to just tell you now. President Trump has said that he would provide early access to Wall Street to Truth Social so that they would be able to make decisions about what's happening. Do you think that that is appropriate behavior for a president?
I haven't read the reports. I'll read it following the meeting here.
Okay. It's interesting, I will say that Josh Hawley actually said that what he thought, that the idea that having a president buy and sell stock and market stock, that there should be a bill that applied to him. And what happened to Josh Hawley was that President Trump came after him. And I'm just wondering if Republicans on the House side are equally afraid of this president coming after them for actually holding him to a high standard, to any kind of standard with regards to owning and selling stock. But I want to go to another matter, and that's this Section 3 of the bill, which is like save light, I guess. And what strikes me is that there are 3 forms of ID now allowed, and there is no tribal ID allowed. Did I miss that? I saw 3 forms that says state ID, military ID, and
passport. There's 5 forms allowed. The 5th one being tribal IDs issued. It'll take me a second to find you the legislative text, but it's 5 forms.
I'm reading. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I'm glad I asked that because I had
You're welcome.
that section. It does cover tribal ID.
Yep.
But the other piece of this bill is that right now, right, you have taken away the money that would allow states, that would help states. And you keep shaking your head, but it's not in this bill. And it is, I'm going back to that awful analogy you all kept turning to, of that this is like a bowl of pasta, that you need an ID to get a bowl of pasta. And Ranking Member Steele, Ranking Member Morelli, you spoke so eloquently about voting is not pasta. Voting is not a privilege. It's not a privilege. It's not something you do when you have enough money. When you have enough money to be able to go to a restaurant and eat as much pasta as you want. It is a right. It's a constitutional right. And our problem is that a lot of people do not have enough money to be able to own a passport. They do not have enough money to be able to own a car and have a driver's license. They do not have the...
Okay, so we talked about this a couple of days ago when we were restreaming this, and this argument has come up a lot, and I've even seen you guys utilize this argument in the chat, that it is expensive to have an official ID, and, if somebody is forced to show their official ID, then they won't be able to vote. They shouldn't have to have official ID. And I think my stance on it is controversial. I'll admit that. I feel that in America, there are many things where we have to pay to play. And one of those things is official documents. If you want a driver's license, you have to pay for that driver's license. If you want to drive a car in America, you have to have a driver's license. You have to have insurance. Actually, car insurance is mandated in the state that I live in. I don't know if it's like that everywhere, but it's actually illegal to drive in the state of Florida without car insurance, okay? So we have to have a driver's license, and we have to renew it. We have to have car insurance, and we got to pay that premium every month, or you're going to get a letter in the mail saying your license could be suspended. Then, if you need a passport, that's another fee. If you want to travel outside this country, you have to get an official passport, and you have to pay for that. In addition to your car, your driver's license, your car insurance, you need a registration also. And you have to re-register every single year. You get a little sticker and it expires, every year, the month of your birthday. And depending if you buy your car, you lease it, the price changes. So that is, hi Deja, nice to have you here. Anyways, that is the price that you pay to play in America, okay? And Deja, she's in Florida also. She lives in a big city. She can attest. A lot of places where you go, you got to pay for parking too. So that's just the way it goes in America. Hey, Scotty, nice to have you. So that's the way it goes in America. You have to pay for things. If you want to go fishing, most states, you have to have a fishing license, okay? So you need these things to do things in America. And if you can't afford an official document, an official ID, a driver's license, and this is a hardship for you, I think we need to reconsider who we're allowing to vote in our country. Because if you can't even afford an official driver's license or official ID, chances are you're probably not paying a lot of taxes. Maybe you're even getting government benefits. Why should you get to vote in America? Because we know what side you're going to vote for. You're going to vote for the side that wants to continue giving you free insurance and benefits and discounted housing. So why should you get to vote in Florida? I think this is a really weak argument that it's too expensive for people to get a driver's license or official ID in order to vote. That is nonsense. If this is really the problem, if it's really the problem, we really need to take a hard look at who we allow to vote in our country. Because it never used to be everybody could vote. It used to be when our country was founded, landowners, they could vote. If you didn't own land, you didn't get to vote. I wouldn't be able to vote. When this 250 years ago, I'm a woman. I wouldn't have been able to vote. I would have had to voice my opinion to Mr. Dave, and he would have made the vote for our families. And I've heard many women my age, married with a family, and they're seeing how certain people are voting certain demographics. And some of them have said, maybe we should just have one vote per household. I don't know. I don't know if that's the answer. But all I know is if we let people that aren't contributing continue to vote, it's not fair. We know what they're going to vote for. They're going to vote and tell you, the hardworking taxpayer, that your money needs to be spent on them. And I just don't think that that's what the founding fathers had in mind. I know that that's controversial, but I just don't think it's right what we have going on right now. I think we really need to rethink who can legally vote in this country. Because if the left is arguing that people cannot afford to get an official ID in order to vote, I think we got major problems in this country, much bigger problems than just worrying about them voting.
Kinds of money that allows them to easily access a passport, a driver's license, or these other things. And that's why a pot of money that would help people get the photo IDs they need would be so essential. And Ranking Member Morale, you seem to want to add to that.
Well, I just say this, that I think there's a little bit of a conflation of two different things. Voter ID, as I understand it, is to prove to a
Okay, so we have some really good comments in the chat that I just want to read. So Deja said, I've accidentally lost my driver's license so many times and had to pay for a new one several times. Because if you don't have it, you can get in trouble, LOL. It's like $50 every time. Absolutely. I could tell you, Mr. Dave, he's definitely lost his license a few times and he's had to, get on the website and reorder. And you're right, it's like $50, but it comes pretty quickly and you have to have it. There's very few places you can go without your driver's license. I mean, you can't drive without it. Let's see. Scotty wrote, "We all know that it's for Democrats to harvest votes and get illegal immigrants to vote in our elections. That's what's really going on." Yep. You could get an ID for a third of the price of a driver's license. Absolutely right. Scotty wrote, "They want to keep everybody on the plantation, and they don't even know that they're on the plantation, but they're on the plantation." I agree. I really do. So basically, what he's saying, well, I'll let you guys interpret that, but Scotty, I completely agree with you. And Scotty wrote, "It's hard for me to be sympathetic to the side and have hard times as an excuse. I've been through the roughest of times and I don't even want to go into it. But I sucked it up and I went through it." And Scotty, I think a lot of Americans share that sentiment. A lot of Americans, they don't want government help. And I know this because I speak to them on a daily basis. I have clients all over the country. And I would say the majority of my clients would rather just suck it up. They do not want benefits. They don't want to take a look at Medicaid or Obamacare. No, they want to pay. They don't want to take the subsidy. They want to do it themselves. They don't care about the different programs because they feel, and they're right, when you take a subsidy or when you utilize a government-funded whatever, there's always a price to pay. It is never free. It's never free. And I'll tell you, because I've owned various businesses for the last 15 years, and I've worked with a lot of different business attorneys and gotten a lot of advice throughout the years. And one piece of advice that an attorney told me a few years ago really stuck in my head. He recommended that we never take any of the government-funded, I don't even want to call them loans, like I guess they are loans or grants, because he told me he had several clients that got like the PPP loans, and they're just heavily scrutinized. And nobody really talks about this. But his recommendation to us was, if you need a loan, take a private loan. Don't take out the government-funded loans, because if they want to get you, they'll get you, and you really have to be very precise when you utilize it, because you could get in trouble. So that was something I was not aware of, but I'm really glad that I never took a PPP loan or any of the COVID-related loans. Just one less thing to worry about. And yeah, Dana wrote, "It wouldn't be free. Our taxes would pay for it." Exactly. And that's the other thing that people just, I don't know if they don't understand it or they just don't care. I think they probably just don't care. It's not free. None of this is free. We're not giving anybody free health care. We're just taking taxes, tax money from hardworking Americans, and we're using it to subsidize egregious premiums to enrich the trillion-dollar business of big health insurance. Yeah. So let's continue.
Poll watcher that you are who you say you are. That's all. So why would student ID not be acceptable? The chairman said it's because it doesn't prove citizenship, but that's not the point of voter ID at the polls. The point of voter ID, as I understand it, photo ID, is to simply prove who you are. You're already registered to vote. That's already done. And so this makes it harder. And I think it's because, honestly, they'd prefer that college students not vote. So let's put a number of barriers in front of them. And the ID, which clearly proves who they are, I am Joe Morelli, here's my ID. It says it right here. I go to the University of Wisconsin. I go to the State University of New York. I go to the University of New Mexico. That's all. I am who I am. And by the way, if you look, even in places like every state literally allows student ID because it's a way of proving who you are. Universities issue them. That's a pretty basic thing. Most states allow hunter's license or gun permits or, in some cases, your utility bills. all you need to do when you go to vote, if you're not willing to accept the system that a number of states have, where you have signature analysis, and you feel the need to have photo ID, why would you limit the number of photo ID possibilities, which simply allow you to prove who you say you are? And by the way, I don't know, we've had, I don't know how many hearings, I haven't heard anybody bring to us people who showed ID and vouched to vote when it wasn't them. I mean, it simply never happens.
All right, so more really good comments in here. Yeah, Dana, I grew up with my dad telling me this. But honey, two things that we know are facts: death and taxes. My dad's in the financial business. He's a IRS registered tax preparer. And the big thing that he always ingrains in me is death, taxes, and you do not mess with the IRS. Like, you need to make sure that your tax returns are on point. You do not want to get caught up with the IRS. Do your taxes. And it always makes me laugh. I don't know, this past tax season, I saw so many influencers on Facebook and Instagram talking about how to evade taxes, and they're not going to file and they're not going to pay them. And I don't know why anybody would go online and say that. That is just the most moronic thing I've ever heard. You have to pay your tax. You have to file your taxes properly and pay whatever you owe. I don't ever listen to anybody if they tell you not to do your taxes. It's the worst business advice ever. But Scotty wrote, even the 501c3 steps on religious freedom and what churches are allowed to say if they are in that program. They snagged a bunch of people with the COVID money with that. It wasn't free money. Yep, exactly, Scotty. And there are definitely quite a few people that just blatantly took that money and, were buying Porsches and crazy stuff. I've heard some crazy stories. But I also feel like there were some high profile cases where it was very apparent that it was politically motivated, that that person that was being accused probably did nothing wrong, and went through hell because they were being tied up with the Biden DOJ. But that's another conversation for another day. And then Scotty, I think I can't see it anymore, but no, David wrote, they say they don't have a license or ID, so how are they getting SNAP and other government programs? Well, I think there's a couple answers to that, David. I know we've done a few hearings about it. Medicaid fraud and SNAP fraud is a major issue. Apparently, the big issue is that the state government and the federal government don't see the same things. They don't share information properly. So there could be somebody that maybe stole somebody's ID, and they can go to various states and get benefits in multiple states. And I think that was something that Elon Musk and Doge uncovered. Just, beneficiaries fraudulently receiving SNAP benefits and Social Security benefits in multiple states because they don't have a way to see and cross-examine. That's a big issue. So 2026, welcome back to the chat. Hopefully you'll be on your best behavior. It's a fair question. They gutted the IRS, so have fewer auditors and limited opportunity to go after the people. There's very little fraud in SNAP benefits. You're just repeating MAGA lies for gullible suckers. Actually, that's not true. I'm not making this up. I mean, maybe you don't watch all the hearings. Doge cost us money. They didn't save it. That's just not true. That's not true. I mean, you're just telling us, CNN, liberal lies. Please just, you can go to these government agencies. You can read this stuff for yourself. And you need to investigate how Doge even originated. So they didn't even give them new money. They just renamed a organization. There was a lot of stuff that Doge uncovered, but people just don't want to accept the truth. but that is the truth.
The other thing that's fascinating about this, in the reconciliation bill, they would give $10 billion, which I'm glad for. I mean, we should be giving money to local administrators, but a portion of that is intended to help facilitate this. But we'd spend billions of dollars on something that isn't even a problem. We got plenty of problems in this country that actually could use some resources to help go to address them. This is not one of them.
One of our problems is corruption, and what we're seeing in this bill is it doesn't address corruption. It just makes voting a little harder, and that seems for the course for Republicans. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and now recognize the gentlelady from Indiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get into my questions about the Stop Insider Trading Act, I want to give Chairman Stile an opportunity to respond to some of the concerns that were raised about voter identification.
Okay, so we have a good comment that I want to address. So Dana wrote, what about all the white-collar crime money that has been forgiven with all the exonerations of people that committed these crimes and their penalties have been forgiven, and as well as billions of dollars? So Dana, this has happened. I know that this happened under Biden, and it certainly happened under Trump. And I'm actually kind of disappointed about this. There were a couple people that Trump pardoned that got in trouble for like healthcare fraud, and were supposed to pay back at least millions of dollars. And when their sentence was commuted or exonerated or whatever, you know, they don't have to pay those fines anymore. And I actually disagree with that. And I think it was a really bad look for him to do that. I don't know why he did. I forgot the person's name. They're like in South Florida, the person that I'm thinking of, because it was brought up in one of these hearings. But I think that was a really bad move on his part. I really do. I don't know why he did it. I'm really curious to know why this particular person was pardoned. And I don't think it's just, you know, because he donated to Trump's campaign or whatever. I think there's probably more to it. And I would love to know the reason. But I think it was a bad choice. I think if he was going to do that, he should wait till like the end of his second term. But I don't agree with that. I don't agree with everything that Trump does. I don't agree with everything that the Republicans do. I feel very much in the middle on a lot of issues. And I'm actually like truly a libertarian, but I also am self-aware, and I understand that libertarianism just could not work in the world that we live in now, because we have some very, I don't want to say stupid, but ignorant people that it would be like survival of the fittest maxing. So I understand that like my libertarian paradise probably would not work out well in America right now. But like I feel certain ways about certain topics. And I think a lot of people are in the same boat as me. And I think there's more people that lean to the left that feel that way too. Like they like certain things that Trump does. They may have even voted for Trump because they didn't like the other candidate in 2024. But we don't love everything he's doing. Yes, and David wrote, I lost faith in our government system 100%. They need to drain the entire swamp. And I agree. I completely agree with you. I wish that we could just have a do-over, a complete do-over. I think there's maybe like a handful of congressmen and senators that are pretty good, but that's about it. Yeah. David wrote, I try to vote for the best idiot for the job. So many politicians are not qualified. Yeah, you're right. And we've talked about this the last few nights too. And a couple of things that are important to address. Number one, last stream, I think the guy's name was Michael. He wrote something about how important it is to participate in local elections. And I thought that was like the best comment of the night on Friday. And I think that's where we do a bad job as American citizens. A lot of us just don't really do a deep dive during like midterms or, election cycles that aren't a presidential election. And a lot of people don't even vote. Or when we go to vote, we're just focused on the president or Congress or Senate, and we're not really paying attention to like the little laws that we're voting in favor of or our local politicians. And I think if we all made a commitment to do a better job and really pay attention to the local elections, I think we could cultivate a much better government system, because these people don't come out of nowhere. They all start for the most part locally. And sometimes you look at a politician, they've been there for so long, and you think like, oh my God, how did this person get in office? But when you do a deep dive, you realize like, they started locally. So I think we need to do a better job and really pay attention to the local elections. Tomorrow in Florida is our primary. And I hope all of you that are in Florida are voting tomorrow. I like to vote on Election Day, so I'm going to be casting my vote tomorrow for sure. But it's really important, and it's really important to do your research on the candidates too. The other thing that we talked about, and I wish that they could reform this, is, I have literally gotten hundreds of postcards and mailers over the last couple months. And like, for some reason, this is how elections are won locally. Like, people spend tens of thousands of dollars to give you like these mailers, okay? And they're basically just like a glamour shots picture of the politician with like some bullet points. Or the thing that's been happening a lot this year is we have a couple PACs or super PACs, and they're just sending you mail every day about the candidate they don't like. So you're getting like all this hate on this postcard about the candidate they don't want you to vote for. So I don't know, they're really expensive. Like, those mailers are a lot of money. Like, I think there's some candidates locally that spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's really kind of sad that that is how people win these elections. I just think that we could do better. I really do.
Chairman Stile, is there not also an affidavit option for those that may or may not have IDs? And what else can you tell us about the ability that this provides to give opportunities to vote while also safeguarding our elections?
You bring up
Sorry, I mean, these comments are really good. I gotta respond to them. Dana wrote, if there was so much fraud that Elon Musk uncovered, how come not one person had been charged or arrested? Well, actually, Dana, there have been a lot of people that have been charged and arrested, but our mainstream news, they do not report that. And I've brought this up a couple times, but if you go to like the DOJ website or just like search YouTube, I want to say it was like the week before 4th of July, the DOJ and a bunch of different states, like I think the AGs, came out and they did all these press conferences about like all the Medicare and Medicaid fraud that they uncovered and they had prosecuted. So there was like billions of dollars in fraud that they uncovered and prosecuted. It was like one of the biggest busts in like DOJ history. So he did uncover, and people are in prison because of that. It's just that our mainstream media, they just don't report on it. But like I said, don't believe me. Go to the DOJ website. You could check out like your state website. I know here in Florida, like Middle District, like the Tampa Bay area, they had a bunch of press conferences. It was like the week before 4th of July, they uncovered it. So there have been a lot of arrests. The other thing to realize too is like a lot of the stuff that he uncovered was like there were people that were being paid that like were dead, or people that were getting paid in multiple states. So there's not really necessarily anybody to like arrest for that. Like, you can't arrest a person that's like technically dead. I mean, I guess that they could like track it to see like what bank account it was going into, but honestly, that would be I think it's just like too expensive to do that. It's like, it's worth it to uncover and bust like a crime network, but to go after each individual, first of all, I think that they had a hard time like contacting the bank and getting that information. But I'm just assuming, I'm just making assumptions. I would just think that it wouldn't be worth it for them, you know? But they have saved us money. They definitely have. And like I said, there definitely were a lot of arrests. I know for sure. DOJ put out some press conferences because I watched them right before Thanksgiving. But thank you so much for participating, guys. This is a great chat tonight. Oh, Scotty, I voted for Trump and I would do it again, but I don't worship Trump and I don't agree with everything that he does. I feel the same way. I love Donald Trump. I think he's an awesome person. I've met him in person. I've always liked him as an entertainer, but he's not perfect. I think he's doing the best he can. I think that he is dealing with a lot of issues that no other president has had to deal with. And I feel bad for him and his family. Like, how scary would it be that, you know, you have your mainstream media that literally created a mental disorder, you know, Trump derangement syndrome, and people see him or hear a trigger word and like go nuts. Like, it's really deranged. Like, that would be really scary if you were part of the Trump family having to deal with these crazy people. And Scotty wrote, Trump is a capitalist and he stands on that. Bernie Sanders is a socialist and he's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. How does he stand on that? And you know what's so funny, Scotty? David and I have brought up Bernie Sanders a lot recently because Senator Fetterman called Bernie Sanders out a couple weeks ago. And basically he said, like, who are you to tell anybody else how to run a campaign? You don't know how to flip states. You don't know how to flip seats, Bernie. All Bernie represents and all he'll ever represent is, you know, like his 600,000 constituents in Vermont. And that's it. And Fetterman's 100% correct. The other thing to think about, too, is, you know, Bernie Sanders believes in socialism and equality and diversity and all that crap. He represents one of the least diverse states in our country. Vermont is one of the whitest populations in our country. So, you know, it's great that he can stand there and say that he stands for that, but he certainly doesn't live with diversity. He doesn't represent diversity in his state. So he's just saying words. And he does not practice what he preaches because we live in a capitalistic society. He's made millions and millions of dollars. So he's a big hypocrite, and I wouldn't take him seriously because he literally represents one of the whitest states in our country. He has no idea what it means to live amongst diversity, how to flip a seat. He just does not know how. He's just talking.
A couple good points we lay out in this bill, in particular for situations where individuals are voting by mail. That one can go through the process of including your last 4 digits of Social Security number as well as an affidavit. What we want to make sure is that everybody is able and eligible to vote, which builds on the previous point, which I think is important to go back to, which is about the need for some individuals who may not have resources to obtain a free ID. In my home state of Wisconsin, the Department of Transportation estimates that the cost of issuing an ID, knowing that the employees and the equipment is already there, the cost of issuing an ID for an individual who can't afford one is a little less than $5, in the neighborhood of $4.50. Last year in the state of Wisconsin, or was it 2 years ago, if my memory serves me correctly, roughly 100,000 people in the state of Wisconsin obtained an ID without payment, costing the state less than $500,000. So the state of Wisconsin provides that to individuals that can't afford it, recognizing that it's required to vote in the state of Wisconsin. Then the question becomes, how do we pay for that? The total cost in a federal concept is reasonably de minimis, $500,000 in the state of Wisconsin, about 2% of the United States of America. You could run that out nationally and get a pretty good idea. A few $1 million to make sure everybody has it. If an individual doesn't have an ID in the United States, a state-issued ID, it's really important to help that individual get that. So I'm a big supporter of making sure that states are doing that. Under Supreme Court jurisprudence, states would be required to do that. Whether or not the funds come through the expansion of HAVA grants, whether or not it comes through reconciliation, whether or not it comes through appropriations, we can work that piece out. But I think ultimately to make sure that individuals who, if there are individuals who can't afford a state ID, we should help them get that. I think that's important. As it relates to student IDs, I think there's a lot of challenges on how some, again, not all, but how some universities issue their IDs, that is not strict protocols as it relates to that in comparison to the 5 ways that we allow for IDs. We all recognize that every state issues their state ID or state driver's license differently. We respect that difference, but we all respect that it's a robust and secure process. And so relying on that, obviously, if somebody has a passport, federally issued ID, if you will, that's allowed in a tribal ID. That being the core concept, I think, strengthens the integrity of our photo ID requirements. But again, these are common sense, and I know some of our colleagues on the left struggle when we slightly make fun of all the different reasons and ways that you need an ID. The point is you need it for almost everything. So goodness gracious, if you need an ID for everything, let's just put the standard in place. You need a photo ID to vote, so we don't have folks going to the polls, voting in federal elections in the state of Minnesota this November, where one person walks in and vouches for 8 other people. The standard needs to be set. You need to show photo identification to vote. Now, ultimately, I'd love to see the whole broader package go through with other election reforms, but this is the most basic common sense principle you can imagine. You need photo identification to vote, and separate, of course, is legislation that prevents members of Congress from profiting off of insider information, the Stop Insider Trading Act.
Thank you. We often hear the Democrats say voter fraud is not widespread. And we look only to Bush v. Gore and the closeness of that presidential election and to understand, and we see it every day in our elections. In my own hometown, we had a city council race that came down to 3 votes. And so it doesn't have to be widespread to disenfranchise voters across the country. So voter ID is a critical component of preventing voter fraud because it doesn't have to be widespread to threaten the integrity of our elections in the United States. How concerned are you with the president's most recent report of China's influence in our elections and the urgent need to pass not just the voter identification provisions in the Stop Insider Trading Act, but also in Save America?
Well, we unquestionably know that there are actors that want to destabilize the U.S. election system. And so we should be cognizant of that and always working to enhance the integrity inside of our elections. To your earlier point, how many illegal votes or inappropriate votes should we accept?
Right.
And the obvious answer is 0. And so you referenced Bush v. Gore because for all Americans over a certain age, they remember that election. But for you and I, not too far from our home state, Marinette Miller Meeks in the state of Iowa won her congressional seat by 6 votes. The Democrat who lost that race challenged that. Challenges come before the Committee on House Administration. And so this is when Democrats were in control. And they were driving forward, trying to take Marinette Miller Meeks out of her duly elected position at that time to try to expand their majority in the House. Mm-hmm. And so when we know House races, because we have 435 House races a year, there's more data points, we know how close some of these races are. Many aren't called and decided for weeks after the election. That is when you recognize how important election integrity is. In narrowly divided House and a narrowly divided Senate, any movement can actually swing elections. And so making sure that we have this standard nationwide, that we know individuals are showing photo identification when they go to the polls, matters. That we know that the members that come from, for example, the state of Minnesota are the duly elected members, that there wasn't shenanigans in those elections. And I think that's really important to do in all 50 states. And this bill sets the standard and says, no, you need to have photo identification when you go to the polls and vote. In federal elections, it matters, it's important, it's common sense, and it's easy to do.
The House and Senate majorities in the presidential election will depend on the integrity of these elections, so I appreciate your work on that. And then turning to the Stop Insider Trading Act, members of Congress are elected to serve their constituents and the American people, not profit from non-public information. However, Americans rightly fear that some members of Congress may be using sensitive information to benefit their stock portfolios. Congress passed the Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge, the Stock Act, in 2012. So lawmakers are already prohibited from using non-public information for their own financial benefit. But many Americans, including me, remain concerned that the Stock Act is insufficient and that we must implement stronger measures, which brings me to the Stop Insider Trading Act, which I appreciate your leadership on. I'm a proud co-sponsor of this bill to help ensure that members of Congress are not able to use their public office for private financial gain. Though we did take an important step, Congress did with the Stock Act more than a decade ago, it's clear members of Congress, though we are subject to the same insider trading laws as every other American under the Stock Act, more needs to be done on this front. Despite the existing safeguards that we have, the American people remain concerned. It's one of the most, I would say, responses I've received in input to the office asking to support the Stop Insider Trading Act. So this will build on existing ethics laws, strengthening the framework with clear, common sense guardrails to increase transparency and accountability. Chairman Stile, from your perspective, what shortcomings have become apparent since the enactment of the Stock Act more than a decade ago? Why are additional safeguards necessary, and what new restrictions in this bill will close those loopholes?
Thank you very much. You note the Stock Act passed about 15 years ago in what it does and does not require. One of the challenges that we see with the Stock Act is because the reporting is 30 days after the fact and the reporting is within bands. That was noted earlier by our colleague, Mr. Scott. That coupled with attention in particular in the social media space raises a lot of concerns. The question then began, how do you prevent members of Congress from profiting off of this in the first place? What's the solution recognizing this concern? Well, let's prevent members from profiting off of any inside information they gain. And let's make a bright line rule that you can't trade, you can't continue to buy and sell individual shares of stock. The bill accomplishes that goal. It puts in place a blanket rule on the acquisition of individual shares of stock. It provides 7 days, minimum 7 days advance notice for the sale. That provides the public notice of any sale. It would gut the ability to profit from that. And it would set up an individual's case in the event that somebody was still trying to profit off of insider information to actually be prosecuted and held account to the law. I think this makes meaningful and substantive reform.
Okay, so Scotty wrote, and I'm sorry guys, for some reason my screen like froze, so I couldn't see all the comments. So Scotty wrote, you cannot trust school ID. Many of those schools are why we're in the situation that we are in because of their ideology and their professors. True, and also anybody can get a school ID. You don't have to be an American citizen to get a school ID. So that doesn't prove that you're an American citizen and you can legally vote. I mean, I went to school, undergrad at American. One of the reasons I chose American is because it had a huge international population. So I want to say like 25% of my school was international students. And they could all get ID that said American University, but that doesn't make them a American citizen able to vote. So, you know, I don't know why that they brought up that argument. I think it seems pretty clear why that type of ID would not be sufficient. Just guessing, though.
Reforms, and it's the types of reforms I think we need to pass here in the House.
It also will ban members of Congress and their families from purchasing individual stocks. I think that's critically important because just because members of Congress might be banned, their family members may also yet currently be able to trade on information that may be accessible to members of Congress. And the advance notice on selling those investments, I think, is an important step to increase transparency and restore public trust. I think this is a must.
So, Russell, you wrote some really interesting things, but I need I need some backup information because I have some insights into what's going on behind the scenes with the elections. But you wrote IDs don't either SAVE Act is complete fraud, only 5 enhanced real IDs even qualify under the SAVE Act. There are no IDs or records available at the scale needed before the vote is a scam. It's already the desperation of Donald J. Trump. Yeah, I really would like some more backup on what you're saying, because that's not, to my understanding, what's actually going on. So first of all, just to make everybody aware, there was a lawsuit that was being scrutinized in the Supreme Court that I think a lot of people thought would pass. I think it was something Watson, but basically they thought that it would pass, and the lawsuit was about making election day, you know, that all the votes need to be tallied on election day, and it would outlaw this, you know, vote counting for days and weeks. But they did not get the result that they were looking for. It was not received the way that I think Donald Trump and the DOJ and Republicans thought it would be. And that was a big blow for the Republicans. They really have been pushing for safer and more secure elections, but also to get rid of all of this, you know, behind the scenes counting and these mystery ballots being delivered in the middle of the night, and they all look exactly the same, and nobody's voted for anybody else except the president, and it just so happens to be a Democratic candidate. Like, it's just very fishy. And that did happen. Like, you can't say that it didn't. Like, that's exactly what happened in some of these states. It didn't happen in 2024 because the Republican Party did a better job and did what they could legally to monitor the polls. But we need safe elections. We need secure elections. If people don't have faith in the elections, we really don't have America. Like, that's what makes America America. Being able to vote for the person that you think best, you know, represents you in your community. And if everybody thinks that it's fixed and everybody thinks that their vote doesn't count, what are we doing here? So there needs to be something in place, something to give Americans a surety that their vote actually counts. Let's see. Russell, you wrote, many sources have been shut down, including libraries. Third-party vendors have to be used. We would have to pay BlackRock for passports and birth certificates. I'll be honest with you, I don't know all the ins and outs of it. Michael, hey Michael, he wrote, people need a door that locks so they don't have to compete. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Scotty wrote, you need to listen to Yuri Bizmanov, who defected from Russia, USSR, 1984, was a KGB agent, but what he said, McCarthy was right. I know what you're talking about, yes. But I do agree with you, Russell, where you're saying that it's a desperate attempt. Yes, Donald Trump is desperately trying to help Americans have safe and secure elections. This was something that he campaigns on, and a lot of Americans feel that the 2020 election, there were some issues, okay? We'll just leave it there. I'm not even going to go into that debate with you guys. But many Americans felt like their votes did not count, and there was some fishy stuff going on in 2020. So Donald Trump has talked about this since that 2020 election, and he campaigned on making our elections safe and secure. So yeah, he better keep trying. He better do whatever he can, however he can do it, to do something for the midterms. We need to do something, because we know for a fact now that there are not one or two issues, there are multiple issues with the way that we vote and our voting software and how things are calculated and the dangers of using electronic stuff and AI. That's all on whitehouse.gov you can look at. I read a little bit of it, back in, I think it was in July, when Trump gave a speech about it. But you can all read it, whitehouse.gov. It's all there for you to read, all the things that they uncovered. But we need to do something because he promised us, the American people, that he would do everything he could to make sure that our elections were safe and secure and that United States citizens felt like their votes really counted. So, yeah, I do think he's trying everything to do that. The thing that sucks is that everything that he's trying to do is being thwarted, being sabotaged. Like, he's getting it from the left in the Senate and in Congress, but also on the state level. I think the DOJ sued 30 states or something like that. They were trying to get the voter rolls, and they weren't successful in doing that. And they've had a big issue. These states will not do what the DOJ needs them to do so they can audit it properly. So it's an uphill battle. I think it could possibly be easily solved, but these states are not making it easy for them to do their job. And I think that's a big issue that nobody talks about, that Trump gets thwarted almost every step of the way. It's not easy for him. Literally anything he does, he gets criticized. And I don't think any president has ever had to deal with the stuff that Trump's had to deal with. I wish that we could just leave him alone just for 6 months. Just leave him alone, let him do what he needs to do, let him implement what he needs to implement, have the left, just give him the green light, let him do his thing. I think we would totally be better off. I really do feel like he is out for Americans. He wants America to be great because he's made his fortune in America and he wants to make more fortune in America, and he wants you to make a fortune in America because that's what billionaires and trillionaires do. That's how you become a billionaire, even a multimillionaire. You become it by helping other people become wealthy also. If you look at the top wealthy people in this country, they got there by helping other people become successful also. I mean, I know you guys think it's controversial, but I love Jeff Bezos. And if you look at all the stuff that Amazon does, he employs hundreds of thousands of people. And he has all these different programs where people can be an affiliate or they can sell on Amazon, they can be an author, they can self-publish their book. People are making 7 figures because of Jeff Bezos, okay? So, people like to criticize him, but literally, he became wealthy by helping other people become wealthy. That's just how I see it, but let's continue. I know you guys have a lot to say about this.
I hope we'll get this bill through across the finish line. Again, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for your tremendous leadership on this issue. The American people deserve confidence that the decisions that we make are guided by what's best for them, not what benefits personal investment portfolios. I hope my colleagues will support this legislation in this committee and on the floor. Thank you.
Mr. Norman, do you have any questions?
Thank both of you for testifying. There was a lot of questions about this before, Brian. You heard it in caucus meeting, I think others. Has most of this been resolved, in your opinion?
Yeah, I actually think that we have a product that
Not every single business. I'm so sorry. I was muted the whole time. I'm sorry. Okay, so basically what I was saying had to do with Scotty's comments. People don't understand, but Trump had to climb out of bankruptcy and all kinds of things that most people can't even fathom to get to where he's at. And Scotty, you're so right. There are so many people that come into this chat and try to disparage Trump and talk about how he's a failed businessman because he's had to file bankruptcy, and they don't even know what they're talking about. Trump is literally involved in over 500 business ventures. You know, some he owns and has created himself, some partnered with other people, but he literally has over 500 business entities over his lifetime that he's been involved with. Out of 500 successful companies, 6 of them filed Chapter 11. So what Chapter 11 bankruptcy is, it's basically like a legal proceeding to reorganize and restructure a business. And people come in here, probably have never even made like $100,000 in their life, and start yapping that, you know, Trump's a bad business person because of bankruptcy. There's nothing shameful about Chapter 11. Some of the biggest companies out there have filed Chapter 11. It's not a big deal. When you are a billionaire or multimillionaire, chances are you failed a few times. That's just the way it goes. You have to take risks, and not everything is going to be a success. But all the people, you know, complaining about Trump and criticizing the way that he does business probably have never tried to create a business before. They have no idea what they're talking about. And it shows when they make comments like that. It's very difficult to start a business and make it successful. It's not easy. You have to have a lot of ambition, a lot of stamina. And how many times has Trump been successful in business? Nearly 500 times, okay? So, like, the stuff that you guys say about him is just so ridiculous, and it's so obvious that you're not even, like, researching the information. You're just hearing it from, like, Joy Behar, and it's really stupid, okay? Give the guy a break. Anyways, let's continue.
That should be able to garner the support of the overwhelming majority of the House.
Joe, you have any comments?
Well, I do have quite a few, but I'll simply say this, that I think at the end of the day, if we want Americans to trust us, if they want to have faith that the decisions we're making are in their interests, that we need to get to a point where we ban the ownership of individual stock by members of Congress, by the president, by the vice president. And until that time that we do, and this bill doesn't do it, doesn't really even come close to doing it, then I think we're going to continue to disappoint the American people.
Well, we know things that the ordinary public doesn't. We have access to things that people don't, and hopefully there's safeguards. You know, if you're a crook, you can beat any system. It doesn't matter what, but there ought to be rules on it. And but I didn't get to hear much of your testimony, if any, but I've heard some of the background on it. But thank you for each of you for taking the time.
I think you can watch it later tonight when you're back in your apartment if you have a few hours.
Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. Seeing no further members here to ask any questions, I thank our witnesses for being here, and you are excused.
Come to Abilene. Yeah.
Which one?
Thank you, Brian. See you.
Thank I now welcome our next panel, Chairman Hill, Ranking Member Waters from the House Financial Services Committee.
Thank you, Pete.
Your full statements will be submitted for the record, and we ask that you summarize your statement in 5 minutes. Chairman Hill, I welcome your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be with the Rules Committee today to talk about H.R. 6955, which is the Main Street Capital Access Act. It was introduced by myself along with the chair of our subcommittee, Andy Barr of Kentucky. Since becoming chairman of the committee, I've made it a priority to restore strength and vitality to America's community banks. These institutions are foundational to our financial system, indispensable to our economy, and a unique strength of our country. The legislation before you is about one simple idea. Let's help community lenders make it easier for small businesses and entrepreneurs to access the capital they need to grow, hire workers, and strengthen Main Street America. For many small businesses, the greatest obstacle to expansion is not a lack of good ideas or hardworking employees, but it's access to financing. Community banks and credit unions remain the backbone of small business lending across the country, particularly in rural communities and in smaller cities. Recently, during our debates about comprehensive housing policy that the ranking member and I were engaged in, you heard me say time and time again that 6 out of 10 home construction loans come from our community banks under $10 billion. Our community banks and their credit unions, they know their customers, they understand local markets, and they're often willing to finance businesses that larger institutions overlook. Unfortunately, over time, outdated regulatory requirements have made it increasingly difficult for those community-focused institutions to deploy their capital efficiently. Compliance costs have risen dramatically, and resources that could otherwise be used to make loans instead have been devoted to navigating unnecessary regulatory burdens. The Main Street Capital Access Act takes meaningful steps to modernize these requirements while preserving the safety and soundness of our financial system. It removes barriers that unnecessarily restrict the flow of capital to local businesses without compromising our strong supervisory framework that protects consumers and maintains confidence in our banking system. This legislation recognizes an important reality that regulation should be tailored to risk. Requirements designed for the nation's largest and most complex financial institutions should not automatically apply in the same manner to community-based lenders whose business model is centered on relationship banking and serving local communities. By improving the regulatory environment for these smaller institutions, we expand opportunities for small businesses that depend on them. Several times this year, Congress has taken on a strong bipartisan basis votes and passed this kind of concept of tailored regulatory compliance based on business size and complexity. This approach means that greater access to financing for manufacturers looking to purchase new equipment, family-owned restaurants seeking to open a second location, farmers investing in new technology, and entrepreneurs starting businesses right along all of our main streets. This is not about weakening oversight. It's about making sure that our regulatory framework is efficient, effective, and appropriately calibrated. Strong financial institutions and vibrant local economies are complementary goals, not competing ones. And the benefits of increased access to capital extend well beyond individual businesses. When small businesses can obtain financing, they hire employees, increase wages, invest in their communities, and generate greater economic growth. These investments ripple outward, supporting suppliers, creating new opportunities, and strengthening local tax bases that fund schools, infrastructure, and essential public services. At a time when many small businesses continue to face inflationary pressures, higher borrowing costs, and economic uncertainty, Congress should be looking for practical, bipartisan ways to remove unnecessary barriers to growth. This legislation does precisely that. The Main Street Act spurs new bank formation, tackles banking deserts, and lowers significant barriers for new banks. It reforms the bank supervisory process to make it more transparent. The bill brings common sense tailoring back to bank regulation based on an institution's size, business model, and risk profile. And it provides certainty around regulatory approval of bank mergers and acquisitions. The bill improves bank resolution framework in a way that protects depositors, promotes greater competition, and allows smaller banks to meaningfully participate in the bidding process for the assets of a bank that has failed. It helps banks attract, retain, and enhance their funding sources to better serve American families and business. All in all, in my view, the Main Street Capital Access Act reflects the principle that federal policy should encourage responsible lending, promote economic opportunity, and ensure that our community financial institutions can continue to serve the businesses and families that rely on them every day. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 6955, and I thank the chair, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Chairman Hill. Ranking Member Waters, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair Fox. We all care about community banks and credit unions. For that reason, I was pleased to work with Chair Hill on a package of community bank provisions included in our landmark housing bill, the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. Oh, there it is. Now, even though Trump refused to sign it, that legislation has become the law of the land. And those provisions help community lenders and not mega banks, big tech, payment apps, or even payday lenders, debt collectors, and credit bureaus. Unfortunately, that is not the case for the bill before you today. H.R. 6955 is a Wall Street deregulation hiding as a community bank bill. This package is made up of 24 Republican bills with just 2 Democratic bills. Tomorrow, Madam Chair, we mark the 16th anniversary of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Community Protection Act becoming law. That law was passed in response to the 2008 financial crisis when, in case my Republican colleagues have forgotten, millions of Americans lost their jobs, their homes, and their life savings. But this package ignores those lessons and rolls back a long list of safeguards and oversight of the largest banks. Importantly, the nation is grappling with an affordability crisis and surge in financial scams and fraud costing consumers tens of billions of dollars. This is all made worse because Trump has shut down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Voting for H.R. 6955 would add insult to injury by hampering a future CFPB from issuing new rules such as reining in debt collectors or abusive medical debt practices. But maybe that is the point. Furthermore, Madam Chair, this bill ignores the lessons from the failure of Silicon Valley Bank and other regional banks just 3 years ago. These large regional banks failed after Congress rolled back capital, liquidity, and other rules specifically for those banks. Nevertheless, this bill lets even more of these large banks escape critical safeguards, risking more failures. In fact, the sponsors of this bill were so zealous to raise thresholds. They increased one threshold that will add bad actors who commit fraud against a bank. Yes, you can't make this up. There's a provision that will increase the amount individuals can defraud, absolutely, at a bank, by then turn around and obtain subsidized financing from the government for those assets from the failed bank. H.R. 6955 also falls well short of what we know can be done on a bipartisan basis to promote, preserve, and enhance access to banking services for Main Street communities. I have a letter led by the National Community Reinvestment Coalition and signed by organizations all over the country, including Alabama, Kansas, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Utah. They are opposed because the bill would, quote, sharply limit monopoly and competition review for mergers involving roughly 96% of all banks. Compress merger review and sideline community evidence, and weaken fair lending accountability. Americans for Financial Reform and other leading consumer group organizations wrote a letter saying, and I quote, "This radical legislation would compound an already aggressive deregulatory spree. Taken together, these changes would be more damaging than the sum of their parts, leaving the financial system dramatically weaker and more vulnerable to instability and crisis," quote unquote. Now, Republicans made a few technical changes at the request of Trump regulators, but let me give you another example of what they didn't change. Wells Fargo, which many of you may remember, created millions of fake consumer accounts and has been the subject of countless enforcement actions for consumer harm, like discrimination and anti-money laundering deficiencies, would have a new tool to delay future enforcement actions even when consumers have been harmed. Madam Chair, instead of letting Wall Street put Americans and our economy at risk again, we should be working together to address the affordability crisis caused by Trump's failed economic policies and endless war with Iran. So I urge members to oppose this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you both. I'm going to defer my questions for a little bit. Mr. Norman, you have any questions? I'm sorry, Mr. Griffith. I should ask Mr. Griffith first. No.
I have no questions.
No.
So, literally, this lady reminds me so much of my grandmother. Like, my grandma had like the same hairstyle, like probably the same sweater. Like, it's like watching like my 95-year-old grandma run a Congress meeting. So I wrote something in the chat. I really want to know what you guys think. Some of you guys have responded already. If you could meet any congressman or senator, present day, that's in office now, who would it be and why? I'm just really curious to know who you guys would pick. I really don't know what that lady was talking about. Like, I don't know. This is a weird hearing. It's really going all over the place. That's all I have to say about that.
No questions. Ms. Scanlon.
Thank you. I think we agree. America needs a strong financial system that supports community banks and credit unions and small businesses because they're the backbones of our local economies. But we're concerned because instead of advancing targeted reforms to support those institutions, what we have here is bundling together of the largest package of banking and Wall Street deregulation since the 2008 financial crisis. And it's just pretending to say that this is going to help Main Street instead of mega banks. Meanwhile, President Trump has spent the last year and a half dismantling the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the agency that actually does protect families from predatory financial practices. So we know the president's actions have already cost American consumers an estimated $19 billion in dismissed enforcement cases, pardoned fraudsters, rescinded rules, and the gutting of the consumer complaint system. This bill would go even further by weakening the ability of banking regulators to protect consumers and preserve financial stability. I mean, if our Republican colleagues were serious about supporting Main Street, they would work across the aisle on targeted reforms that strengthen community banks without weakening the safeguards that protect consumers and taxpayers and the economy. Instead, once again, this bill asks the American people to take on more financial risk so the banking industry can make more money and face less accountability. So, I'm not in favor of putting the thumb on the scale for billionaires and big businesses and leaving the American people to shoulder the risk. Ranking Member Waters, after the financial crisis in 2008, Congress established a number of regulatory thresholds and supervisory authorities that this bill would change or roll back. Can you explain why those guardrails exist and what could happen if regulators lose the tools they need to identify problems before they become crises. And I think you mentioned some California banks.
Well, thank you, Representative Scotland. I just want to say, in the way that you have described your concerns, that's exactly what is happening with this bill. As a matter of fact, I do believe that we have to be concerned about members who say that they support community banks, but really they are using this as a way to hide the deregulatory efforts that have been made by some members on the opposite side of the aisle. And to tell you the truth, I think that with all of the good work that we have done with the big housing bill, Mr. Hill and I are working together, a bipartisan effort. This will hurt some of what we've accomplished in making sure that we get rid of deregulatory work by many of those who would like to see the big banks continue to have more power and more control than they should. I reference Wells Fargo when I spoke just a moment ago. Everybody remembers the fake accounts that were set up. Everybody knows we worked very hard. We worked so hard, we were able to undo those who sat on the board and the CEO at one point so that we could try and clean up what was happening in Wells Fargo. Well, Wells Fargo really doesn't mind. It is a cost of doing business. We don't want our banks to be able to undermine this kind of work that we have done in order to save face, for the big banks. And so this bill does not do what I think some will think it does in terms of support for community banks. In fact, I think will undermine much of the work that we have done.
Well, I do want to take the opportunity to thank Chairman Hill and yourself for the incredible work you did in putting together the bipartisan housing bill and overcoming a number of obstacles, not the least of which is always the Senate, to get that passed and hopefully start providing more housing options for Americans, because I'm sure you hear, as I do all the time, how much housing problems are just driving so much of what's going on in our community. So thank you for your work on that. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Norman.
It's one of the, thank both of you for coming. This is one of the few times, Maxine, I think you're kind of happy with this bill, which is a good thing. No, I appreciate your bipartisanship. Chairman Hill, the Campbell's rating has been a subject of a lot of discussion. I know in my banking days where they felt like it was too much was left up to the whoever was judging the sensitivity, the capital adequacy, has the appeals process, is there a time limit? And I noticed that's in there. If a examiner is not fair and doesn't have the ratings that they feel is there an adequate time for the appeal process, and is there ending time to get an answer on it?
I appreciate that, Mr. Norman, and let me start out by saying that I couldn't disagree more with the ranking member's opening statement on her positioning of this bill. This bill is aimed at the heart of America's consumer banking companies, our community lenders. There's nothing in this bill that's going to benefit the biggest banks in the country. In fact, to the contrary, this bill makes our local community banks and our small regional banks much more competitive with those big global Wall Street banks. It's just a fact. In fact, this bill allows them to now compete dramatically for both deposits and for resolution of banks when they fail, so that these failed banks don't automatically go in the hands of one of the biggest banks headquartered in New York, for example. And I can walk through more detail on that as we go through the evening, but let me answer your question, Mr. Norman. Don Regal, a Democratic senator from Michigan in the 1990s, said that one of the biggest frustrations he heard from his constituents in the Regal-Neal bill that was signed into law in the 1990s by President Clinton, that bill said that banks ought to be able to question an exam output in some orderly way, to have an ombudsman, to allow them to assess with an independent view whether that bank had been treated fairly or not. And this was after really 10 tumultuous years in the economy in the 1980s where a lot of banks failed all across the country and a lot of savings and loans failed. But the government never really fully implemented that. And so in this bill, we have a provision that allows, I think, for a much more fair examination process, that we got technical assistance from the regulators and from bankers. Is this a fair process by which people could question and exam output? I believe that's represented in the bill. And also, we facilitated in the bill that if they're not satisfied through that process, they can go to federal court, of course, which is every citizen's right.
Okay, well, thank you. Maxine, you have any comment on that?
Well, I'm just looking at what is in this legislation. Voting for H.R. 6955 would add insult to injury by hampering a future CFPB from issuing new rules, such as reining in debt collectors or abusive medical debt practices. But maybe that is the point. I guess all that I'm saying when I point to Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is there's still a lot of work to be done to help our constituents. I want to tell you something I just read on the plane coming out. Walmart is putting beef under lock and key because the thievery that is going on by people who can't afford the increased price of beef anymore is just running, their profit margins on beef. And so why is this happening? It is happening because we have an affordability crisis. We need to be paying attention to what we do to protect our consumers. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is there to make sure that our big agencies who have so much power are not working on behalf of just big banks, but on behalf of small.
It's really interesting that she said that in her state, meat is under lock and key. I believe she's in California. And to my understanding, in that state, if you steal under like $900, like that's okay. They're not going to go after you. They won't prosecute you. And she's right. Everything is really expensive. We've talked about this in here. Like it's really expensive to live nowadays in America. It's a problem. It's a big problem that we could go on for hours talking about. I think in the chat we could probably solve the problem, but I don't think our politicians really want to solve the problem because it doesn't affect them. But let's talk about this, that now in California, the meat is under lock and key. And I've seen in other states too, you go to CVS or Walgreens and there are a lot of products that are locked. I noticed this after COVID, and I live in, a pretty nice area, pretty affluent. And after COVID, I noticed that certain products were under lock and key at the drugstore, and I spoke with the people that work there, just wondering why they were. So these are the things in my area that are put under lock and key, and you guys tell me in the chat if you're seeing this in your area. Razors, the cartridges, that was a big thing that has to be under lock and key. Fake eyelashes, okay? Like the Ardell, strip lashes, that was a big thing that needed to be under lock and key during and after COVID. Fake press-on nails, those have to be under lock and key in my area. You know what's not under lock and key? Sunscreen. Nobody apparently is stealing the sunscreen. But the fake nails, the fake lashes, the razors, those are hot items in my area of Florida. I don't doubt that meat in California is under lock and key. If you've seen any videos in the last year, there are so many businesses that have left California. And I know that there's great areas of California. People love living in California. I have several friends that live in California. They love it there. They think it's the greatest state ever, the perfect weather, and they couldn't go anywhere else, even though they don't love the politics. Because believe it or not, I would say 100% of the people that I know that live in California are actually conservative and tell me all the time how actually a lot of people in California vote right and are conservative. And I definitely think there's a lot of funny business going on with their voting. I know you guys, feel the same way. But a lot of businesses just cannot survive there. Not when you allow people to just go into your stores and ransack it and nothing happens. How can you run a business like that? Okay? Like, if you go to the drugstore, like, everything is under $900, okay? So you just allow people to come and steal it and there's nothing you can do about it. How could you keep a business open? And, they have those crazy, not minimum wage laws, but like what they have to pay their workers per hour is a lot higher than other states, and their gas is much more expensive. I mean, it's a very expensive state to live in. But how can you keep a business up and running when your government tells you people can just come in and steal things and there's nothing you can do about it? Or somebody could just come into your home and you can't really defend yourself. You could get in trouble. You could get sued. There's been cases in California where the robber sued the homeowner because they defended themselves in their home, okay? That's what you're dealing with in California. And this blows my mind because if you watch any of the sheriffs in Florida, the attitude is totally different. Like, a couple of the sheriffs they love it when we as citizens protect ourselves. They tell us, listen, if you're coming here to Florida and you are going to try to break into somebody's home here in Florida, you should just expect to get shot. We advise our Floridians to buy more guns, buy more ammo, be prepared. If somebody enters your property, you need to defend your property. And one of my best friends, she lives in Arizona. She had an issue with an ex being weird and trying to fly from another state to see her. And Arizona, I think she's in Phoenix. Sheriff's told her the same thing. You got a gun? She's like, yep. Well, if you got to defend yourself, you got to defend yourself. We're here. Call us if you need us, but make sure you got your gun on you. Make sure you have ammo. You need to defend yourself, okay? Even with, like, all the crazy, like, riots and parades and whatnot, like, Florida sheriffs are pretty united on this, and so is Governor DeSantis. Somebody is impeding traffic. If somebody is basically falsely imprisoning you, trying to make it so you're in a dangerous situation and they're in front of your car, you can run them over. That's literally the message that Governor DeSantis and many Florida sheriffs told us last summer, okay? They want Floridians to defend themselves. Like, I live in a law and order state. That's just the message that we get here, and that's why a lot of people move to Florida. But that's not what they're being told in other states. And it's scary. It's really scary when criminals have more rights than a law-abiding citizen. That's really sad. What kind of way to live is that?
Banks, we can't excuse them, or we can't let them off the hook. As a matter of fact, if you really want to do something for community banks, separate big banks from community banks in a real way, instead of big banks hiding behind legislation supposedly for community banks.
Well, thank both of you for testifying. Appreciate it. I yield back.
Okay, just real quick, and please answer in the chat if I'm missing something. I don't understand what Maxine Walters was talking about with her little speech, her little 36-page speech, because I thought we were talking about SPA loans. Like, wasn't that the topic? And I think that's why she lost me. What does locking up meat in a California Walmart have to do with SBA loans? Please Please tell me what I missed.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. Ms. Leisure Fernandez.
Thank you so very much,
Jimmy,
Chair,
you're
for recognizing
cracking me up
and-
with your
and for the
comments.
conversation
You
today.
really are.
You know, I'm a big fan of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And I'm also very concerned that what we're seeing is President Trump is regularly pardoning fraudsters who provide tens of thousands, sometimes millions, to his campaign or to his family's businesses and so forth. But who's standing up and fighting for consumers? Who's fighting for working families? Who's fighting for the people who are holding those credit cards, who are seeing those big banks gouge them? And that has in the past been the Consumer Financial Protection Bureaus. And before President Trump took office, the CFPB had returned $21 billion to Americans cheated by scammers. $21 billion,
Yes.
right? And that's their money.
That's right.
That's their money. But what we're seeing is that he's taken an axe to this great Consumer Protection Bureau. He's fired staff, and this has cost consumers. And so what does this bill do to protect the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau? I mean, it needs protecting now, too, doesn't it, Ranking Member Waters?
Well, you aptly mentioned the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which many of us have fought so hard to have some place for our consumers to register their complaints. Prior to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, there was no place really in government that the average consumer could lodge a complaint. Well, I want you to know that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau helped millions, and you just mentioned the return of assets and money and whatever that our consumers were able to experience. And so if we don't have a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, those people who are being treated badly, who have been ripped off, who have been taken advantage of, really don't have anywhere to go. And so we've got to look out really for the consumer.
Okay, Gabriel made an amazing comment. This shouldn't even have to be debated. Anybody with one sting in their brain left knows that you have the God-given right to protect yourself. Most politicians have bodyguards. Yes, exactly. And that, like, what you're saying actually applies to, like, the majority of the things that we're being told, especially by the left, but the right does it too sometimes. It's like, do as I say, not as I do. Like, they want to lecture you and make it seem like, you know, they're out to help the poor person and they want to protect you and blah, blah, blah. But they don't. They're not doing the same thing. You know, they cry out, oh, defund the police. But to your point, they have Secret Service, they have bodyguards, they have enough money where they can have private security. So they only want to defund the police when it comes to, you know, the masses, the poor people, the peasants. They want all the power, all the protection onto them. This is not what, like, our founding fathers envisioned. It's almost like we've allowed our government to become like the British royals here in the US over the last 250 years. I mean, I don't think it happened at the beginning, but if you think about what our government looks like right now and the amount of money that these people are raking in on a $174,000 salary, it just doesn't add up. You know, people want to criticize Trump and say that Trump made, you know, $2 billion since being in office and blah, blah, blah. Trump was already a billionaire. Trump was already a billionaire. You think his businesses just shut down because he's in office? No, he has other people running his 500 various ventures, okay? I'm happy for Trump that he's continuing to make money. If you're a good businessman, you don't need to be actively working in a business after a certain amount of time. So good for him. But what's fishy is these people that are literally on a senator or congressman's salary for 50 plus years are worth $100 million. That's what we need to investigate. And what they're saying is so dangerous to the people. They do not care about you. They just say fancy words that sound nice, but they don't care about the people. They just want to amass more money, amass more power, and keep everybody fighting and keep everybody down. I don't think every politician is like that, but I could probably count on my two hands, like the ones that do actually care. Hi, PTSD Demon. Nice to have you back. All right, let's keep going, guys.
Banks, everybody knows that I and many of you, we really support the small banks. We really support the community banks. We wouldn't do anything to undermine the community banks, but this bill does that. It really undermines their ability to have a voice, to have someone that's going to speak up for them when they have been defrauded, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've got to fight against the bill. I know some people will be tricked, and they'll think that they'll be helping community banks. Not true. And so I'm hopeful that we're able to get the message out so that people will understand, like you do, exactly what we have to be aware of.
With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Chairman Hill, I appreciated the comments that you made. Having grown up in an extremely rural area, I'm very familiar with how important rural banking is, and I have very strong feelings about how bad Dodd-Frank has been over the years, and I'm glad that to see your committee coming in to correct some of the problems with Dodd-Frank. I don't think that this hides the deregulatory effort on the part of Republicans. I think we're very proud of the deregulatory efforts that we're putting out there. And what I am growing up, again, in a rural area, I'm quite familiar with how banks know how to make decisions because they know the people, they know the area. They can make a lot of great decisions based on the area. And frankly, I get a little put out with the people who want to help us poor rural people whose institutions just can't get along without big regulations from Washington, D.C., when they do much better. The bank in my community was a very small bank, forever and ever and ever, the most profitable small bank in the United States for a long time, and did a wonderful job. Ms. Waters, you bring up the beef under lock and key. What about those flash mobs out there in California who came into the drugstores and the jewelry stores and stole when our economy was at its best in this country? It isn't the economy, it isn't the affordability that makes people thieves. It's bad values on their part. So I thank you both for coming today and bringing this good bill to us. And I look forward to
Madam Chair, may I?
discussing it. Do you have something you'd like to add?
I'd like to add.
Okay, let's just get a little bit more clarity on what she's talking about, because I know I was confused with Maxine Water and what she was saying, so I just researched this. Okay. So Maxine Waters was talking about the Federal Home Loan Bank System, a network of 11 federally chartered banks that provide liquidity to banks, credit unions, insurers, and other financial institutions so they can keep lending, especially during financial stress. The controversy is that these banks receive significant federal advantages and are viewed by markets as having implicit government backing, while only a portion of their profits is required to support affordable housing. Waters has questioned whether the system is giving enough back to taxpayers and communities in exchange for those benefits, especially after federal home loan banks provided major funding to troubled institutions around the 2023 failures of Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, and First Republic. Her broader point was about oversight, whether the system is properly balancing its role in stabilizing banks with its obligation to support housing and community development. So basically, she is salty because, you know, these banks aren't providing enough funding to lower income families, it seems like. I'm not sure, though. I really could not understand what she was talking about.
Just because, a couple of things. This bill is completely tailored to small banks. Just a few weeks ago on the House floor, on the suspension calendar, we gave regulatory relief on the suspension calendar, 100% vote in this House by voice to tailor regulatory compliance for banks under $6 billion. Of the 5,000 banks in this country, probably 4,500 of them are under $6 billion. And it's precisely that theme that is in this bill. So first of all, this bill is absolutely written and tailored to small community banks, both rural and urban. And if it's not, then why did the Opportunity Finance Network all across the country represent 500 community development lenders? What about the National Bankers Association of African American Banks? What about the CDFI Coalition of Urban, Rural, and Native Communities nationwide, and the Community Development Bankers Association all support this bill strongly because it has that balance in it. And then this assertion that this is weakening consumer protection or consumer laws, nothing could be further from the case.
I don't believe that at all. I don't believe that assertion at all. I appreciate your speaking up. We need to get, would you like to get those on in the record?
Well, I would just simply say that this bill in no way weakens consumer protection. The laws on safety and soundness, like if you want to stop a bank from unsafe or unsound activity, are fully able to be implemented in this statute, and the same for consumer compliance on fair housing, fair lending, equal opportunity, credit opportunity. All those laws are in place and fully implementable by our supervisors.
Well, without objection, I can insert those letters
Yeah, without objection,
of support
Madam
for
Chair, may I?
this bill and for community banking.
May
I
I?
know the community bankers in North Carolina, and I know how good they are.
Madam Chair, may I?
Well, I'm going to recognize Mr. Scott.
Okay.
Ms. Water.
Madam Chair, I appreciate the chair and the ranking member being here today. Mr. Hill, do you have any further comments on the bill? I mean, I know I'm from a small town, and regulatory relief for the small banks, I think, is important.
Well, I ran one of those small banks before I was in Congress. I ran it successfully throughout the financial crisis. Our bank grew and was more profitable in the years of the financial crisis and following the financial crisis. But we were operated in very small rural counties, like 10,000 people in the county, in the Mississippi Delta. And I know that I spent more time worried about the next compliance exam or hiring the next compliance officer than I did than hiring the next loan officer, because of the one-size-fits-all approach on consumer compliance and safety and soundness laws. And what we do here is, without compromising compliance or compromising safety and soundness, we tailor it to the business mission, size, and complexity of the institution. And I think this will really help, particularly small rural institutions. I was just in the chairwoman's state earlier today with a group of small banks from around North Carolina, and they explained to me how they thought this would benefit them specifically in that regard. And if they are better off, then their customers are better off.
That's exactly right.
Yield back to the gentleman.
I don't do much banking anymore, unfortunately, but I look forward to the day when I'm back.
Okay, I think I understand this. This is very confusing. So basically, in a nutshell, Maxine Waters' point is, okay, the government is, partially funding this organization. And because government taxpayer money is funding it, they should have more regulation and they should be required to allocate more of their money towards like low income housing for like people in her state, for instance. But the purpose of the government funding is to ensure if these organizations need to bail out some other banks, they have the funding to do that. And as a result of that, more Americans, don't lose, their banking. They don't lose their footing because these organizations are making sure that if a bank has an issue, they have the liquidity where they can go in and they can basically like bail them out. And also, they already allocate 10% of what they're given from the government that has to go directly to banks that fund low income housing. And what Maxine Waters would prefer is if a bigger portion of that went to, low income housing. But the argument that's being made is no, we need less regulation. And the whole point of subsidizing these banking systems is to have the liquidity. So if a big bank needs help to stay afloat, we have that liquidity to give them. Our money's not tied up into like affordable housing. So that's the argument in a nutshell. To sum it up, the strongest criticism of Waters' position isn't really low income people don't deserve loans. It's don't turn a financial stability mechanism into primarily a social housing program, because its ability to keep banks liquid during crises has value to everyone. So that's basically what Republicans are arguing. Like, we need to keep things as is, no more regulations. We do not need to tell them to allocate more money to low income housing. We need to leave it as is, and because if we don't, then we can run into issues where it affects everybody. So that kind of makes sense to me.
In business and banking again, and I look forward to walking into a small community bank where they know me and I know them, and I'm not just a number like you are with a Bank of America or one of those big boys.
You raise a good point there, because I mentioned at the top that 6 out of 10 home construction loans are made by banks under 10 billion. If you ask the biggest banks in the country, what is your home construction portfolio in Arkansas? And the answer will be none. We don't do that business.
Ag as well.
And the pandemic exposed that the biggest banks like Bank of America, or other, I'm not picking on Bank of America's, but the largest 5 to 10 banks have a credit requirement and a credit box that doesn't facilitate reaching out to a lot of small, rural, entrepreneurial, or local farm or local businesses. And that's why our Main Street banks are essential. We don't want to be Canada with 4 banks. We want to have a diverse in size and diverse in location financial system. This bill, the Main Street bill, will aid Main Street, not Wall Street, and help achieve that.
I know BB&T and SunTrust weren't necessarily your hometown community bank. They originated that way and kind of bought them. And, kind of the bigger they get, the less important you are to them and the less customer service you get out of them. And so I'll just tell you, the small banks are the ones that I very much want to make sure we're taking care of, and I trust you, Chairman Hill, to do that. And so, and competition is good for the marketplace.
Yep.
Because that's where customer service will succeed. With that, Madam Chair, I yield.
Thank you very much. I thank our witnesses for being here.
I mean, honestly, guys, I think the best point that's being made here is we need diversity in banking. We need to, we're really doing this a lot in this country, and it needs to stop. We allow these big corporations to just eat up all the little corporations. Then we have monopolies, and we run into like major problems when these corporations become monopolies. And our government is supposed to protect us against this. And they're not doing a great job. They really aren't. So I have to agree with the Republican stance that less regulation. We need less regulation. We need more competition. And we need more banks. And there's a big argument in favor of these small local banks who can lend directly to the people living there. They know, the terrain best. So I think we need to do everything possible to protect that. I think that's very important. I mean, let's be real. We know that some of these big banks, I'm not going to lie, they are corrupt. What was it, Wells Fargo? Was it Wells Fargo that was just like signing people up for loans and credit lines without their consent? Bank of America, that's another fraudulent bank that does shady stuff. I think my dad sued them years ago for some crazy stuff that they had done. When these banks amass so much money and so much power, it's kind of dangerous. And our credit system is ridiculous. When our parents bought a house, they didn't have a credit score. Hazen, thanks so much for coming. But seriously, I just think the credit system, the credit score, is the dumbest thing ever. I don't know who came up with that, why it's even a thing, but it's also very comical to me that our government does such a terrible job balancing a budget or even sticking to the budget they create, and us as American people, we have to worry about our credit score, and it's actually a very fraudulent system if you really read into it. It's very weird and niche, what you need to do to have a good credit score. Things that would make sense to you that you would think would increase your credit score actually don't. This happened to my dad once. He talked to the banker. This is when credit scores first came out. And, my dad had several lines of credit with a institution, and he talked to his banker, and he's like, I want to increase my business lines of credit. I want to increase my credit score. What are some things that you could do? So the banker, advised him to pay down his line of credit. Okay. So he did. Took his cash and he paid off the majority of his line of credit. Let's say it was $100,000. Okay. Well, that next week, that bank, I think it was actually American Express. They had a business line of credit. They took his $100,000 worth of credit, his line of credit, and took him down to $10,000, okay? So he paid it off, but he didn't have to. He didn't need to pay it off. He was up to date. He just wanted to increase his score. But actually him doing it lowered his score. Okay? And I've been like penalized before too for like paying off all my credit cards. Like I paid off my credit cards, or like I never missed a payment, never had like a balance, and then like they reduced your line of credit. And then it lowers your score. So things that you think would like increase it actually don't. It's really weird. It's a really weird, stupid system. I don't know why we allowed this. We really need to get rid of it. Anyways, guys, it's getting late here. I'm going to call it a night. Maybe we'll get through this hearing tomorrow. We've had so many good comments in the chat that, I have had a hard time just listening to the hearing, but you guys are great. I hope everybody had a fun night with me. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. Check out the new memberships, because we do have a couple memberships that have a Discord channel that we can chat in. But anyways, I will see you guys here tomorrow. Have a great night.